Hello and welcome back to the third round. We have a new addition to the collection this week. I recently received this little class BB 7200 of the SNCF and I thought we should have a look at it today. As usual with the new additions format, we'll cover a few basics and a bit of history to put the locomotive in context. Then we'll have a closer look at the model and we'll end the video with a run on the layout with a few related models this week. Before we set off, if you end up liking this video and you want to support the channel, please be sure to hit the like, subscribe and alert button before leaving today. Super thanks are also available if you feel the content deserves it. Whatever the option you choose will be much appreciated. Many thanks. Now, on to our topic. We'll start with a quick model overview. This is a Märklin product, of course, released in 1986 under model number 3325 for the analog version and 3625 for digital. You'll find them on page 25 of the catalogue that year. Both versions remained in the standard program until 1989. A two-rail version was also offered under the Hamo brand in 1986 and 1987. The reference number for this one was 8325. All versions are cosmetically identical. If you are familiar with the call versioning system used by collectors, this 3325 is categorized as 3325 version 2. And the 3625 as version 1, which is inconsistent for brand new identical models released the same year. What happened here is a bit complicated. To make a long story short, mistakes were made. A very limited quantity of an initial version of the 3325 was produced in 1984, but not released. This is because of quality issues, the main one being the livery. Märklin had used a very light shade of grey, almost white, which was simply too far off the SNCF colour. The roof also needed some work. Märklin had to go back to the drawing board and make a few changes that were implemented with what is now known as version 2. But the initial production wasn't thrown away. It was kept in storage, and the stock ended up being sold a few years later in 1991. I am unsure of the exact context. It could have been a surplus inventory sale or some form of special series maybe. But the end result is that the defect and limited production immediately made this version very collectible. As a result, it fetches high prices, as you can see with this example. Okay, on to a few vital statistics. The model measures 20 centimeters buffer to buffer. It is a full metal construction with die-cast body and chassis. The model is fitted with electronic pre-reversing and mechanical reversing units, controlling a 3-pole motor, driving 2 axles fitted with 4 traction tires. Looking at the cab, we have directional headlights. The taillights are only painted on. We have a hook coupling as well, and this applies to both sides, of course. On the roof, we have 2 one-arm pantographs, which both can be used for overhead operations. Now, as usual, let's have a high-level overview of the prototype for context. As mentioned at the beginning, our model represents a BB 7200, a multi-purpose locomotive of the SNCF, the French National Railway Company. The locomotive was designed and manufactured by Alstom. 240 units left the factory between 1976 and 1985. They were numbered 7201 to 7440. This locomotive belongs to a family of machines affectionately referred to as Cassé, which translates to broken noses in English. They owe this nickname to the distinctive design of their cabs, imagined by French industrial designer Paul Arzans in the early 1960s. The inspiration for the design came from the position of a sprinter driving out of his starting blocks. It was meant to convey an idea of dynamism, very much in line with the mood of the moment in France. This was the middle of the De Gaulle era. But this design also brings a few safety features for drivers. The inclined windshields prevent blur, and the nose provides a crumple zone to give the driver some protection in the event of a collision. The basics of the design were replicated on multiple locomotive classes produced by Alstom until the late 1980s. The BB 7200 is the last single-current locomotive ordered by the SNCF. It was designed for the 1500-volt DC railway network, covering roughly two-thirds of the French territory, from Paris towards the southeast and southwest of France. The rest of the country operated at 25,000-volt AC. The SNCF also ordered 205 units of the multi-current version of this locomotive, the BB 22200, for nationwide use. In addition to sharing its design with the BB 22200, the BB 7200 was also the base for the Dutch 3000-volt DC class 1600 and its later derivatives. They all look similar, but the disposition and quantity of the power components installed on the roofs is different. Technically, a large amount of its components are simple evolutions of tried and tested technologies. Motors and bogies are very close to the ones used in the BB 15000 that preceded the BB 7200 by a few years. Motor control and regulation are done electronically using thyristors. The locomotive was designed as a multi-service locomotive, so it was suitable for passenger as well as freight services out of the box. But different transmissions could also be specified depending on the allocation. As a result, several groups of machines exist. The original multi-service configuration with a maximum speed of 160 km per hour. The V200 configuration, used for passenger services with a maximal speed of 200 km per hour. And finally, the PV configuration, PV is short for Petite Vitesse or low speed in English, used for freight and speed limited to 100 km per hour. In response to changing needs, machines were modified over time. Some faster machines became PV machines, some were equipped for use in multiple traction, some for push-pull services, and the last locomotives of the series would even receive regenerative braking capability. In the southwest of France, a few engines were equipped with hydraulic buffers for use with Spanish Talgo train sets. Over the course of its 10-year production run, a few modifications were made. Visible changes include fitted cow catchers or debris catchers, or reduced inclination of the windshields to increase the space available in the cabs. Throughout the 1980s and 1990s, the deployment of high-speed rail progressively pushed the class away from major routes towards regional and freight services. As with other European operators, the SNCF fleet was reorganized based on activity in the late 1990s. The years that followed saw an increased deployment of multiple units on secondary lines and a decrease in the freight activity, leading to the first withdrawals in 2011. The process is ongoing, and there are just over 80 units left in service today. In terms of liveries, all locomotives left the factory with a béton livery, also designed by Paul Arzans. A handful of unicorns received new liveries in the 1990s. In the 2000s, new activity-based liveries were introduced, for example the frais livery, and a large amount of machines were repainted or wrapped as part of the maintenance cycle. The liveries still around today are the béton livery, the en voyage livery, applied between 2000 and 2010, and the later grey livery. Our prototype, the 7298, was delivered in 1980. It was one of the locomotives equipped for use with Talgo train sets. Its nose became grey later in life, probably due to some repair work, and it was withdrawn in 2014, having covered 7.4 million kilometers. This concludes the high-level overview. You'll find links to the sources I used to compile it, as well as photo credits, in the video description down below, as usual. Now, let's have a look at my 3325. And there it is. I bought it from a shop I use rather infrequently. It was listed as used in good condition, nothing more. Let's see what I got for my money. Full disclosure, I have already tidied up the locomotive on this occasion. This is not a first look as I would normally do. The box is in good shape. There are a few storage marks here and there, but nothing to whinge about really. The box is still doing its job. Inside, the locomotive tray looks intact and not discolored, which is good. Let's take it out. And sadly, we have no paperwork whatsoever, which takes a bit of the originality away. So I'm going to put the locomotive on a presentation rail so we can have a closer look. And there we are. Well, I don't think it looks too bad. We'll have a quick look around first. We have a version 2 with its cow catchers, the correct SNCF grey colour, and the roof arrangement. And the model is indeed in good shape. I'll just point out a few things. On both sides there are tiny little scratches on the top of the nose. I think this was caused by the packaging. I think the locomotive might have been stored upside down without protective felts for a while. Otherwise, it's a good, honest model. It's not mint, but it's not very bad. Okay, while we're here, I mentioned in the overview that the Dutch class 1600 was based on the BB 7200, and I think this is what caught Märklin out during the development of the 3325. The Netherlands were always a much larger market than France for Märklin, so I assume they developed the 1600 tooling with the intention to reuse it for the French version. Now, we have an example of the Dutch 3326 here, and based on the pictures we saw earlier, I think the 3325.1 is technically identical to this one, colors aside of course. So we have no cow catcher, a different roof, and separately applied plastic horns. Now if we put this one next to our model, we can see the differences on the roof better. Well, I'd say it's a good thing they picked this up on time. But back to our model. All things considered, I don't think I did too bad with my purchase, at least cosmetically speaking. Alright, let's move to the layout. And there we are. I have serviced the locomotive already, but I'll show you the interior quickly, as some of you like to see that bit. So, I'll undo the single screw, and the body comes off. This reveals a typical 3300 series arrangement, the pre-reversing unit, the mechanical reversing unit, the 3-pole drum collector motor in the motor bogie, and the lights with their plastic fittings, as everything is isolated from the chassis on 3300 series locomotives. The model was drenched in oil and pretty grubby, leading to what I would call a black finger service, and I also had to fit brand new traction tires. The locomotive still needs a quick run-in, so I'll do this now, and while this is happening, we have a look at matching stock from the 1980s. There were the Cassé liveried coaches, reference number 4161 and later 4170, and the 4253 and 4254 with short couplings released later in the 1980s. There were a few more freight options with a few tank wagons like the Elf or Total, or the Special Series Renault containers as well, and we also had other wagons on the export program. But failing that, any wagons from other countries would have also worked. By the way, these 3 cars in the catalogues you see now are the only ones I still need to complete the freight section of the collection. So feel free to contact me if you have one for sale. The channel email address is in the video description. Before you comment, I know I could find them on local classified sites in Europe, but as a UK resident, I unfortunately can no longer use most of them, as my registrations were cancelled after a certain geopolitical change a few years back. I think we'll use Cassé coaches today, and I think this might be more realistic than usual because the SNCF used Eurofima VSC coaches on pilgrim trains to Lourdes in the south of France. Now, I put a link at the top if you don't know what I'm talking about. Okay, well, let's send this lovely train on the track and park it out of the way. There we are. Now, I also took other locomotives of the same family out. I thought it would be nice to run everything together, even if this is completely unrealistic as the prototype used different currents. So we have the Dutch 3326 we saw earlier, the prototype 20011, it's model number 3333, and the BB 15000, which is model number 3321. All of these featured in dedicated videos on the channel in the past. You'll find them in the new additions playlist. There's a link at the top as well. And I have put direct links to some of the videos in the description too. If we are going to run them too, I'm going to need to get some more stuff out. So, one moment please. And we are back. Everything is moving already. Here's the star of the show. Lovely, isn't it? I'm going to switch to a few scenes in various parts of the layout now. I have put details about the other compositions in the description. I'll just point out that the double-decker coaches behind the 3333 are not Märklin, but Jouef coaches from the 1980s. If you watch the video about the 3333, you'll find out why I chose to buy those. Right, I'll hand over to the trains now for a few minutes. Enjoy! Well, everything behaved nicely. It was nice to see the other locomotives on the move too, as most of them hadn't been on the track for a couple of years. I didn't even need to service those. Okay, that was it for today. I hope you enjoyed the video, hopefully enough for you to give it a like, maybe subscribe if you haven't already done so, or even send a super thanks my way if you feel the video was worth it. Thanks as ever for all your support, and bye for now.